Thank you. Morena everyone, welcome to the final TWE committee for this term. And I'll just start with a karakia. Whakataka te hou ki te uru, whakataka te hou ki te tonga. Kia mā kina ki uta, kia mā tara ki tai. Ihi aki ana te atakura, hi te o hi huka, hi hohu. Ti hei Māori ora. Kia ora. So today we have apologies from Andrew Turner for absence, Anne Galloway for lateness, and Councillor Goff for potential possible early departure. So could anyone like to move those apologies? Mel, seconded Sam. I'll put those. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Opposed, that's carried. We've got Jake and Celeste on Zoom, so I'll try and keep an eye on the screen there, guys. Welcome. We've got so far no declarations of interest. Oh yes, we have Mel too. Is it two? So there's the Summit Road Protection and the Summit Road Reserves. Sorry, speak up. Under weak control. Okay, well we'll just note that one. You've got that hand from Andrew. And
I'm the chair of the authority, but they're not connected. Just letting you know that.
Yeah, it should be okay. So we'll note those, and then I can just put them all together, if that's all right. Thank you. Anyone else to speak up later? No presentations of petitions today. So items 7, 8, 9 are the Banks Peninsula West Melton Zone Committee, and item 10, Waimakariri Zone Committee minutes. Can I have a mover for those? Mike, seconded Jimmy. Any discussion on those? All those in favour say aye. Aye. Opposed, that's carried. And that takes us through neatly to the item 11, the Three Waters report. Oh, Helen, there she is. Morena, Helen.
Just the minutes and pre-confirmed.
Oh, did I miss those?
Yeah.
So this is item 3. I'm sorry, just backtracking, Helen. Item 3, confirmation of previous minutes. Moved by Mike, seconded by James. All those in favour say aye. Opposed, that's carried. Thank you. All right, Helen, welcome.
We've got a short presentation for you before we get into the report proper. Right, thank you.
Microphone on. Thank you.
Cheers. Okay, good morning everybody. Before we get into the bi-monthly report, as usual, because this is the last Three Waters Infrastructure and Environment Committee meeting for the year, I just wanted to look back on two aspects of our work. First, the capital delivery and our planning function, and the second, the quality and compliance function, which has grown and matured over the last 3 years. So for planning and delivery, we've got the three main areas of work. So the wastewater is where the largest of our capital programs sits, and alongside a large program of mains renewals, which aren't all that obvious to people except when we close their streets or make them one way for a certain period, we've got a number of particularly significant achievements. So the first one is the Littleton Harbour Wastewater Scheme. So that means that the discharge of treated wastewater effluent to Littleton Harbour will cease in the middle of this year. So the discharge from Governor's Bay has already stopped. The discharge from Diamond Harbour has stopped, and at the moment the last one will be from the Littleton treatment plant. And we have 3 new pump stations in place and all of the pipe work to bring that back through the tunnel and across to our main Christchurch wastewater treatment plant. So that will be a great achievement. The second one is the Akara wastewater treatment plant, and we have an interim discharge consent for that plant to operate until 2030. And during that time, we will build the new plant and, of course, develop the areas for the irrigation of the treated wastewater, which you're very familiar with. Devotional wastewater is the next one to tackle, and we've got options for disposal to land out for consultation at the moment, so that one will come back through to council. A couple of other things that are really important in the wastewater area is improving the monitoring of our vacuum systems, and we've brought that in-house and onto our own telecommunications, which enables us to have better control of that. And we're putting in a variation for our wet weather discharge consent. And you'll recall a memo and a bit of a presentation on the wastewater overflows during wet weather events, where we've managed the volumes down considerably over the last few years, and there's still some frequency issues in terms of the consent that we need to talk to Environment Canterbury about. There's a whole lot of ongoing work in the vacuum sewer systems. We're planning, of course, for the new development that will happen through the district plan changes and meeting that national policy statement for urban development. We've got a lot of infrastructure planning underway in terms of the Greater Christchurch Spatial Plan. We're doing some work with Environment Canterbury and Wairua on septic tank consents out at Birdlings Flat and what the long-term outcome is in Birdlings Flat. What is the best approach to wastewater treatment there? And, of course, the options assessment for what we do instead of the trickling filters, whether we replace trickling filters or do something else out at the wastewater treatment plant in terms of that secondary treatment process. So there's a lot of construction work going on out there, and there's a lot of thinking about the future still going on in the wastewater sector. So next to water supply, once again we've done an enormous amount in terms of mains, sub-mains, laterals and water meter replacements, and also done a lot in the backflow prevention area. So those all happen and mostly are unseen, however very important to the security of the network. More significant ones that people will notice: the Jeffreys pump station, which was, of course, the suction tank was damaged in the earthquakes. We've finally shut that pump station down, and we're redoing the suction tank and upgrading the pump station itself. At Blythe, we've started drilling for the well renewal up there. Spraydon pump station well renewing again. The drilling has started. Reservoir inspections, you'll remember we've got the rolling program. Originally it was a 5-year rolling program, and we're trying to do that in 3 years. So we've compressed it, and we're trying to accelerate through those reservoir and tank inspections. Kokorarata, we've been working with the Runanga over there and supporting them in terms of exploring water supply options and just helping them out with sealing off some springs that were unearthed. And then it was difficult to shut them down again. We have the water supply and wastewater management needs assessment that has been completed, and we'll bring that to you in a briefing so that you get an understanding of that. That's mostly for small settlements across Banks Peninsula. And of course we've done the work for the Ministry of Health on what it would take to add fluoride to our water supply. Christchurch is a challenging water supply for fluoride because of course we have the 52 pump stations rather than one single treatment plant. So it's a more expensive exercise than for most towns. In the same way, we're looking at infrastructure planning to support the Greater Christchurch Spatial Plan. We've got our rezoning work that's underway and the smart water network being trialled out in Rāwhiti. And on to stormwater. Now, stormwater is, of course, a lot more obvious, and up on the top right there you can see the Eastman Sutherland's basins and wetlands. So we're spending around 30 million on the top of the Opawaho Heath catchment and planting hundreds of thousands of plants and shrubs, trees and shrubs up there. A lot of that area is already open to the public, and there's more to come. So people really enjoy it. Lots of people think it's just a really posh dog park, I think, rather than a stormwater and flood attenuation system, but it's extraordinarily effective, and some of it, of course, has already been used in storm events. We have had a few challenges to program delivery, particularly in the stormwater area, so that is not going as well as in the water supply and wastewater. However, we should pick it up over the next few months, particularly the planting. In the bottom left there, you can see the big pump station that picks up at the bottom end of Dudley Creek and goes into the Avon, and that's the Archimedes screw. And you can almost see the figure of a person right at the bottom of that. So that's an enormous pump station there in terms of the lift required to get the water up and over and into the river. And at the bottom there, we've got the Otakaro Avon River Corridor and the Waitaki Stopbanks Basins, Wetlands, Cycleways and Landscaping, which has begun. There has been a short pause on site there because we did encounter buried asbestos from the demolition works that took place following the red zoning and the demolition of the houses there. So we're just working on containing that. The other area that's really important in our sort of planning and delivery is asset management, and that's the area where we put together the briefs for future years. So make sure that that conveyor belt of projects keeps running through, and planning right through to financial years 24 and 25. They're also supporting some of the upgrades around the Naval Point development over in Littleton, and the multi-use arena, of course. One of the other areas of work that is keeping the team extraordinarily busy is the backlog of as-built information that's coming through from our contractors. So once the work is finished, we've got to pick up all that information and get it into our corporate data sets. So there's a huge amount of work in there, and we're playing catch-up. So moving to quality and compliance. Now, quality and compliance used to be a relatively small part of Three Waters, and now has its own dedicated team. And that's in response to the increased regulation for water supply and stormwater particularly, and in anticipation of increased regulation in the wastewater area as well. So the new team was set up in 2020 and looks after it looks after our resource consents, where the main point of contact, of course, is Environment Canterbury, but also looks after the water safety plans, where the point of contact is Taumata Arawai. So the quality and compliance function goes right across the water supply, wastewater and stormwater. It also begins in design, through capital delivery and across operations. So the compliance work goes across all aspects of our business, and the team members in here are being cross-skilled so that they can work across the Three Waters and across the parts of the business. And a lot of that is because we need to be ready to respond to incidents. So if we have an incident, we need to be able to get people out in the field, do the monitoring and follow-up that's required, do the incident investigation work, and then put in place the improvement plans. In terms of the water safety plans, these are produced in-house, and we maintain these are living documents, so we update them as required. For the Christchurch water safety plan, that's probably our biggest and most complex. We'd probably update that every month as new infrastructure comes in or there's a change in the way that we operate our network. For the smaller water supplies, they are more stable and not updated quite as often, but there's a water safety plan for all of our community water supplies. One of the things that we're doing here is that we have a very proactive approach to our water safety plans, and we have a program of internal audits to ensure that we know that we've got compliance. Three Waters consents. So the council holds that 486 resource consents with Environment Canterbury, and 274 of them are within our unit. So we have coastal permits, we have water discharge permits, we have land use consents, and we have water take permits. So we have a very large number of permits. A lot of them are small and short term and associated with particular capital projects, but there's some really big important ones. So the first one is we have a single comprehensive take consent for the City Council's water supply. So that's 154 wells that we take water from our community water supply. And a lot of those wells have particular provisions around how much we can take, what rate we can take it from, and particular monitoring. For example, the ones out east, we need to monitor for saltwater intrusion. The ones up in the northwest, we were monitoring for nitrates until we did the deepening program. But each of those wells and each of the aquifers has its own monitoring program to check on any trends and any changes. The next biggest set of consents is for wastewater discharge. The largest, of course, is the one at Bromley, and it goes out through that 3 kilometre ocean outfall off New Brighton Beach. The next one is Littleton, and of course that one will be surrendered once the wastewater comes back through the tunnel and into the main Christchurch plant. And then we've got a handful of smaller ones, Wainui, Tikau Bay, Devotial and Akara. The next important consent in there is the Wastewater Overflow Discharge consent, and that means that we monitor the overflow events, and we have a big planning program for reducing those wastewater overflows, and then of course the capital program that comes in behind it to address the high priority upgrades required. And finally, the Comprehensive Stormwater Network Discharge consent, which is one of our newest consents, and the whole point of this, of course, is to improve the health of our waterways. We have, under this consent, we have restoration projects. So we're improving the waterway itself and the habitat, and also the treatment systems through the basins and bespoke treatment devices to improve the water quality. This is the area where we most engage with the community. So it's pretty hard to engage with the community on a sewer main upgrade, let alone ask anybody's help. But in the stormwater area and the waterways, the community is very active and involved, and the stream care groups across the city are a great help. And that leads us into the Community Waterways Partnership, which was initiated under this consent and contributes to this consent. And there's a big focus on getting children involved. So the next generation, of course, understand what it takes to keep those waterways healthy, because the best approach is to stop anything getting into them, rather than clean it up on its way or once it's there. So I'm happy to take any questions on that or on the report.
Fantastic, Helen, that was brilliant. Thank you very much. It shows you the enormity of your portfolio. And it'd be even more eye-watering if you'd attached dollar figures to some of those projects, because some of those are in the millions. So are there any questions for Helen? Mel? And then Jimmy?
I just wanted to know if we wanted another water supply well, for instance, do we need to update the consent? Like, how does that work?
Yes, we update the consent, but we don't have to get a new consent.
Right. Okay.
So we have a comprehensive consent, and within that consent we have a total take, and we're not up to that total take, so we've still got capacity in that consent.
Right, okay. Cool.
Jimmy?
Thank you. On page 71, you have the Denton suction tank and suction tank. One is nearly completion. The other one will be commenced in July. I just want to know these two, the suction tank, whether it's part of the drinking water safety plan or not. It's outside.
Yes, they're covered by the drinking water safety plan. So the reservoir and suction tank program is part of the water safety plan and the improvement program under the water safety plan. Okay, that's good. But if that's true, but when the Denton suction tank completed, will it continue, back to the to connect directly? Because at the moment it's bypass. That's right. At the moment we've got bypass. They will connect. Yes. Okay. But how about how much percentage of the dose for those coordinate? Still 0.2 continually. It'll still be 0.2 until we've got all of the suction tanks in that zone up to standard. So you mean it's the tournament otherwise? The new assessor need to assessment or not? No, we assess it ourselves. Okay, not necessary for me. Okay, thank you.
Tim?
Helen, thank you. Great report, and thanks for the work you're doing. And it's really good that we've got the two officers now with regards to the sediment control. And thanks to everyone so that's now been confirmed in the annual plan, which is great. But on page 98 or 52, depending on which pages numbers you're going with, but it just seems to start off that ECAN and us were going to share the cost of these two officers. But I'm just wondering, is that the case? Because it just reads at the end of it on 5.1 in the conclusion that it doesn't seem to be. I'm just wondering
No, it's not co-funded with Environment Canterbury, so we're funding the sediment and erosion control officers ourselves. However, we are working closely with Environment Canterbury to ensure that we have complementary education programs.
Because they've got to be warranted by ECAN, and they've got to be dual warranted. Is that right?
No, I think these ones will be warranted under the, well, they may be warranted as building inspectors as well, or they could get a warrant under the new bylaw. So remember, we've got a new bylaw coming, and under the new stormwater bylaw, we're updating all of the warrants for our officers.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
So just, Tim, just going on from that, in 4.3 and 4.4, it does say this role was not progressed. So maybe that's a different role. It was considered that the warranted enforcement officer role would be co-funded with Environment Canterbury. Council would provide location work in their behalf, share of it, full-time employer 234 over 3 years. And then they're saying this role was not progressed due to several factors.
That's right. So that's just a bit of a history of how it evolved. And now we have our own officers that will be appointed and a new bylaw which responds to the requirements of the new comprehensive discharge consent.
So someone had to do it, but it seemed no one was doing it, so we've picked it up. So, but somewhere along the line, it just seemed that the funding had fallen on us rather than shared. But but the important thing is that it's been approved, we're doing it, which is the key thing. And maybe we can, whoever's got the best contact in with ECAN, kind of wonder where their 50% fell off.
Yeah, it's disappointing, isn't it? Thanks, Tim. Phil?
Yeah, thanks, Helen. Down where you had those, Archimedes screw pumps down at Dudley Creek, New Brighton Road, where it goes out to the river, needs to be fixed. But I understand the pipes under there are in a bit of stress. Or so that's from what I'm told. New Brighton Road can't be fixed in that point because the pipes underneath are failed.
I'd have to go back and check with the project manager.
I talked to Transport and I said, why aren't we doing this little bit of road? And they said, that if you wouldn't mind checking it out for me, that'd be good, because it'd be one might lead to another. And when the Sydenham tank, which is cool, and I see the price here, that's nearly the same price as the whole Benrare pump station and tank. Is that why would that be, please?
Sorry, which one? The Sydenham?
The Sydenham tank, Benrare's 7 million, and the Sydenham tank's more or less the same, but it's just a little bit less. But there's no pump station with that there. It seems to be quite a lot just for the tank. Is there a reason?
So there's a very large tank going in there.
Lot bigger.
So 500 cubic metre tank.
Okay.
And there are very poor ground conditions there. So I don't know if you've ever stood on that corner of Brougham.
Yes.
When a big truck's gone past and the ground shakes like this. So a part of the cost is ensuring that the ground is...
There's a lot of weight going on. Yeah. And in the long run, when the Jeffreys Road one is finished, because it's a new pump station and tank, the same as Benrare, and it's just mainly for the people that are listening, when we did the Benrare one, you said that there's no chlorine going into Benrare because it's a new pump station, new suction tank, and we've got all our...
all the backflows resolved, yes.
How far away from because Jeffreys Road's going to be a new pump station, new tank, have we got a few issues with the backflow preventers that stops us putting the chlorine? My question is, are we going to put chlorine into the Jeffreys Road one when we start it up in a year's time?
Now, I need to check.
Or could we not?
I need to check the network map, but I think Jeffreys is in the west zone, and if it's in the west zone and everything's up to standard, then no.
Cool. Okay. Because we can't at the moment because it's no, that's good. Thank you very much, Joe.
Thanks. Helen, I've got a question on the septic tanks there in Birdling's Flat, and it's on page 32. I don't know what the other page is. So currently there's 45 active consents, 18 of which are expiring this year, and 120 operating without consent because they didn't require one. So What's happening there? I know it's kind of like you've put like it's a work in progress between agencies like Environment Canterbury and us, but so is that contaminating the water out there because it's so low to have a septic tank?
So there's been some work done between ourselves, Environment Canterbury, and the Runanga to look at what the best wastewater solution there is long term. So at the moment, the septic tanks are over the last 10 years, septic tanks have been consented and gone in, and the groundwater modelling would imply that the groundwater is coming back out towards the coast rather than going inland and towards the lake, which would be of major concern.
Right.
However, there's more work that needs to be done to confirm that and to have a full understanding of where that groundwater is moving. And we want to do that work with Environment Canterbury.
So is there like a timeline for that work? Do you know?
It's underway at the moment.
Yeah, but I mean for completion, how long are we looking at?
No, I don't have a timeline for completion for that.
Could be years.
No, I don't think it'll be years. We want to get it resolved so that we can make decisions, or so that Environment Canterbury can make decisions on consents for new septic tanks. Otherwise, people can't build.
Yeah. So it might be good if that work was included somewhere in these reports. I mean, not monthly, but maybe quarterly, I think. And then I just had one more question on page 8, and you talk about the risks to our chlorination, requiring a chlorination, and you've got the 1, 2, 3, 4, but you say the corrective action includes ongoing chlorine treatment for 2 of these risks until they're satisfactorily addressed. So we've addressed the jointed lead pipes, we've addressed the backflow, and the number 4, the civil earthquake, is just what it is. So are you saying that the 2 are contained in number 1, which is the cracks in the roof and the below ground walls and the reservoirs? Or have I got that completely wrong? I can't see being 2 out of 4 in there.
All right, so that was the previous water safety plan and an update on that. So the reservoirs is 1. The wells are also, of course, one of the. So the 2 here are the reservoirs and tanks and the backflow that would require chlorine. However, yes, backflow has now been resolved. So we're going to update our water safety plan, and the new one won't have backflow as an unacceptable risk.
Great, that's where it is. Okay.
And nor will it have the lead coming from those lead jointed pipes.
Yep, that's good. So that's just a lag in the reporting. And then also at the top of that page, you've got more studies and work will be required to comply with the least compliance rule, draft compliance rules. So how long is that going to take?
That's for the source water.
Yep.
So most of the source water compliance work for Christchurch is more or less complete. So we've got all of the modelling work, and we've done the monitoring that we're required to do in terms of age dating those wells. What we now need to do is make sure that the source water work on Banks Peninsula is up to the standard required. However, it's nowhere near as complex as for Christchurch. So over there we generally have a number of stream water supplies and some bores.
Great. Oh, that's good. Thank you. Yanni.
Thanks. I was just wondering, on page 76, it talks about the response times, the water and the wastewater. It talks about the contractor being hit hard with COVID, and also the high number of job volumes. Do you know what sort of the benchmark would be to get back to a more regular state of jobs that were required? Like, I'm just trying to understand, I guess, in terms of the 1,762 that have been reported for April and the sort of trend, where we ideally, if there is such a thing as like back to normal, we would get to, where we wouldn't be having a high number of jobs.
So we can't control the number of job requests that come in, so they are reactive.
Right.
So that's 1,762. We need to respond to all of those and resolve them.
Do you know how it tracks compared to, say, last year or the previous 5 years, like what the trend is?
I can get that for you if you like.
I think that would be quite useful. I know that when I look at the response times, despite the fact, and I know it's just March and maybe things have changed, but it still looks pretty good. Like the urgent ones, are just are being completed within an hour, and then I guess the 5 hours is the time to resolve it. So I'm just trying to kind of understand from a public point of view, if people ring and log a water leak, generally within the 72 hours or the 96 hours, we're fixing most of those. So people wouldn't be waiting for months or weeks and weeks having to put repeated requests in.
That's correct. We're on top of it at the moment.
Right. So that's
So there are not long wait times at the moment.
Yeah. So the key thing is for people to report.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then just coming back to the water supply safety plan, I see, sorry, I'm just flicking between the pages. I see that we've asked or kind of suggested that we would now be acting in accordance with the water supply plan 2021. Was that?
That's correct. So we are operating our network in accordance with our updated water safety plan. So that's the water safety plan that responds to the new framework that's released.
Okay, cool.
And we're not operating it in accordance with the so-called approved plan, which is now out of date.
So why do we not have to put chlorine into places in the Rafiti zone or the areas that we currently don't have chlorination in? Why do we not have to do that if we don't have an exemption and we're working under that plan?
Because the new standards haven't yet been released and are not in place. So Tamata Arawai are working on those new standards under the new legislation, and they were expecting to have them released earlier this year and effective from the 1st of July. Now they're expecting to be released within the next few weeks, and we expect them to take effect from later in the year. The date 15th of November has been mentioned, but not yet confirmed.
So when will we be able to take chlorine out of other water supply stations that we've done all the remedial work on?
So if the wellheads are secure, the suction tanks have passed inspection, and the reservoirs, and there is no unacceptable backflow risk in the zone, there is no chlorine. That's how the system is operated today.
So So
approximately 30% of the city, under normal demand conditions, has no chlorine. However, if we have higher demand over the summer, then we have to add back some of those wells that haven't yet been remediated, and some of those pump stations where we don't have sign-off on the suction tanks. And so there's more chlorine in the summer in high demand periods than there is in the winter.
Right. So what are the zones that currently don't have chlorine in them?
So that's up on the website and live every day, depending on the inspections and the operation. But at the moment, it's Brooklands Kaianga, Rafiti. I think the northwest is almost entirely chlorine-free.
Right. And are those ones that have never had chlorine, even when we've had to put the temporary chlorine in? Or are they ones where we've actually been able to remove it?
Both.
Right.
So it's a mix of stations that have never had chlorine and stations where we've been able to turn the chlorine off as the remedial works have been completed.
So the whole issue with having, the drinking water assessor and an engineer sign off on something being secure.
There's no more double sign off of wells.
No longer required. So the good news is if we do the work, we can take chlorine out of our water supply.
That's correct.
Right. Sorry.
Thanks. Phil.
So
Oh, sorry, Yanni.
Oh yeah, cool. So that's really good. Do you know, just focusing on the central zone, because that's the biggest one as I understand it, what's the time frame for taking chlorine out?
I can't give you a fixed time frame on that until we've completed the reservoir inspection program. So the reservoir inspection program is underway, and of course most of our reservoirs are along the hills and feed back down into some of that central zone. One of the things that we are doing is the rezoning project, however. So the central zone is the largest zone, and we intend to carve that up into 3 or 4 smaller zones.
Which would mean that we can take chlorine out quicker because we don't have to fix the reservoirs.
We take it out zone by zone as we resolve all of the issues in each zone, yes.
So is there any opportunity to rezone something in the short term to get chlorine out quicker where we've got the suction tanks?
No, rezoning's not a short term. It's not a simple exercise. It's a major planning exercise, and then a capital projects to deliver the necessary infrastructure following it.
Right. Okay, just the final question from me is just the Bells Creek, the storm water filtration system. When are we likely to understand the value of that intervention and the sort of assessment of, how it's worked? Are we likely to get some sort of closeout report or some sort of, lessons learned or a sort of post operation report into its effectiveness? Because I know that was quite an expensive and new kind of thing that we were doing at the time, and it would just, I don't have any sense of how it's working, although I know there were some delays.
Yes, certainly I can ask the team to have a look at that. And one of the most important things, of course, is monitoring the water quality downstream.
Yeah.
And sometimes those natural systems take a while to respond. But yeah, I'll see what we've got to date,
Right,
and whether or not there's enough data to show any trends.
Thanks, Helen. And also, at the time when it went in, we weren't unsure what the OPEX would be on that as well. So is it worth putting a note in the resolution here that an update come to what would be the council now, or sometime within, what would be a good time frame?
Where are we? June?
Say by the end of the year or something?
No, we can say we can probably deliver that in September. We just need someone to go back and review the data, the monitoring data that we've got.
Put in there as a 2 that the committee request a
Report on the operation and effectiveness of
the Bells Creek
the Bells Creek stormwater
filter. Lovely.
filtration device. Or treatment device is probably better.
Because how long ago did we put that in? It was maybe 4 years, maybe?
It's a number of years, yes.
Maybe 4 or 5. Yeah. See. Filtration device. Operation and water quality. Effectiveness. Yeah. Okay, is that okay, Yanni? Thank you. Phil?
Sorry, Helen, just one more question. With with the devotionals one that's out at the moment, where we're going to do the new sewer system and pump it maybe onto the golf course and stuff like that.
Yeah.
This 3.7 million that's here for the membrane filtration upgrade, is that part of that money or is it on top of it?
Oh, I'd have to go back and check. So devotional wastewater.
Yeah, it's membrane filtration. It's improve the quality of the stuff from the devotional wastewater treatment plant. And I
Yeah,
just
it
want to know.
sounds as though it's just for the membrane filtration and not for the irrigation.
Yeah, so what I'm getting at is on top of the irrigation part of it.
I can check for you, but yes, that's certainly
Thank
what
you.
it looks like.
Ta.
Yep.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Helen. Just a quick question. I was looking at the Grampian pump station and note that it's got mitigation by chlorination, and it's obviously had the wells raised. Is that because of the work that's happening at Redwood being
I'd have to go and check what the so we have a whole decision tree for why chlorine is at any particular pump station. So I'd need to check whether it's the suction tank there or whether it's a neighbouring pump station.
Okay, thanks.
So would you just send a memo through to the committee in response to that at some point?
Does everybody want to know, or just a memo back or an email back to Mike?
Okay, that's fine. Everyone happy with that? Yep. All right. No more questions for Helen. Lovely. All right. Anyone want to move Helen's brilliant report? Sarah, seconded by Phil. Is there any debate or discussion? Rather than just saying thank you, Helen, what a really comprehensive report that is, and thank you for all the work on that and clarity.
Cheers.
Thank you for continued hard work. I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Opposed? That's carried. Excellent. So we go through now to the which item number is it? 12. So Triennial Zone Committee's uptake report, and none of the chairs are available today. So we are going to be delighted by the company of Diane and Liz, two of the supporters, the staff supporters of the committee, so they'll be able to answer any questions that anybody has. Have you got any, welcome, have you got any opening comments to highlight anything?
Just that it's been a busy year, and with the councillors may recall that we have a somewhat new set of terms of reference. So the zone committees are basically getting a lot more involved in on-the-ground type of activities, which I think are reflected in the report that you have in front of you.
Yeah. I've got a couple of questions. I mean, I've got one on page 105, Le Bon Space Springhead Protection. Do you know what that means? How do you protect a springhead? Is it like fencing around it, or putting
I'm sorry, which one was that?
a Le Bon Bay Springhead Protection on page 105?
I'm not sure about that one, but we can check the detail for you.
Okay. And then just another question on page 106 about the Altercalcino remote sensing. Do you know what that is? Sounds like we're using some sort of smart metering there to sense the water quality, perhaps, or.
Yeah, I don't remember all of the details. It was a proposal from the trust, as that's mentioned there. So this is funding that a number of the community projects would have received from the zone committee. So each zone committee is allocated a fund of money that can be used to support community activities. But I can get you more information about that specific one.
Okay. And is that funding reduced? Because it stated it's 50K now. It used to be 100.
Yeah. So the formerly there was a immediate steps biodiversity fund. Like you say, it was the amount of 100K per zone committee. That's been reduced this year, and there had been initially an indication. I want to say it might have been in the draft LTP for ECAN that next year would be 75, but as I understand it, next year will be 50 as well. That's my understanding. I may have that wrong. But I think the plans are to increase it eventually. And it's not limited, the new fund is not limited to strictly biodiversity. So it's I guess you could say, a bit more community initiatives focused. Again, the focus is going to be on water quality and ecosystem benefits.
But it's fair to say that ECAN would have other funding for biodiversity, wouldn't they? That sits outside of the zone committees, I'm pretty sure.
They may do it. We certainly do, which you're hearing report after this one.
Well, we do. I know that, but yeah. And so I'd say that they've got pest control. So maybe it's a changing emphasis of the zone committee to more community-led activities. And you probably can't answer this, but on page 108, they've got a mention there, the Christchurch West Melton, of the research into the colorectal cancer and increased nitrates and drinking water relationship. Does anybody know what's happening with that?
There is a proposal for funding for a research project. And at this point, I think the decision hasn't been made yet, but certainly once the announcement comes through, I'll pass it along to councillors in a memo or an email. That's probably the most current that I'm aware of, is that research project, and that project was looking at the relationship between nitrate in drinking water and birth outcomes. So kind of following up to some research that was done in the US.
Yeah, but isn't it is it specifically looking at the new current maximum allowable values? That's the debate. That currently allowable values are really high. I think they're still around. Are they 11?
Oh no, yeah. In
Danish-
terms of that, as far as I know, the last I can recall seeing from the Ministry of Health is that they weren't looking at doing anything in the near term regarding any change in the drinking water standards for nitrates.
That's disappointing. So have they actually responded to the zone committee formally on that? I know that we got 2 letters and then we wrote back again.
Yeah, I'm just trying to remember. It seemed to me that the first response that the zone committee got was pretty much what I just said, that there was no intention for the government to be looking at this point at changing it. I think, and it seemed to me that the letter also pointed to taking advice from the World Health Organization, and that process is quite a long and slow process. And the last I looked, which to be fair was a while ago, there were no plans on the part of the World Health Organization to look at changing the nitrate recommendations. So, yeah, I think that's where it stands at the moment.
But are we obliged to follow their standards, or can we set our own as a country?
No. The World Health Organization, that's not a standards recommendations. Any government can choose to set their own standards. So we're not obliged to follow those. The New Zealand or any other government could set their own requirements as they saw fit. That's pretty much, I guess, what I can say on that.
And so, Taumata Arawai is not concerned around nitrates in water. It's more about drinking water infrastructure,
yeah.
isn't it?
I couldn't answer that question.
It just seems frustrating that there's nothing we can seem to do to look at these alarming statistics that have come out of the I think it was a Danish model, wasn't it? The work they did over there.
Yeah, there was the Danish study. There was also a couple of studies that were done in the U.S. Looking at the relationship between nitrates in drinking water and either birth weights or other outcomes that were less than positive in terms of birth outcomes.
Okay, thank you. Got Yanni then Tim.
Yeah, I was just interested to read on page 33, the Canterbury Water Management Strategy Refresh. And then it goes on to say process for appointment of zone committee members. But is there actually a refresh of the water management strategy? And if so, what's the role of us in looking to change some of the targets so that, like for nitrates at least, we get lower limits?
To the best of my knowledge, there was some work that was done a couple of years ago to look at some interim targets for the Canterbury Water Management Strategy itself. But
Right.
that work was done. I don't believe that there's any plans to do anything immediately in regard to the strategy itself. So the refresh is referring to the makeup of the zone committees themselves.
Not the actual content. I mean, if I look at ECAN's website, where they're measuring the targets, water quality targets not met, the catchment nutrient loads not met. It's pretty concerning, right? Like, we're often told that this has been a really good success, but actually when you look at some of the targets, it's quite concerning that we're not seeing a difference. Do you know, and again, I appreciate if you're not the right person to ask this question, but one of their targets was to actually review the water consents by 2020 to look at, I guess, the opportunity to look at reducing the negative impacts. So do we know if anyone's actually done that, or if it's happening, or how we get it to happen?
I would refer that to someone in ECAN's consents group. I'm not sure what they will have done at this point.
Right, but it's a job of the water zone committees.
No, not to look at resource consents. That's well outside their terms of reference.
Right. Okay. Oh, okay. I'm not sure why it's in the actual document. So review 2020 target review of environmental flows and catchment load limits. Establish and begin to implement a program to review existing consents where such a review is necessary in order to achieve catchment load limits. And this is in the Canterbury Water Management Strategy, targets and goals. So just help me understand. So the water zone committees, they have to work towards those goals, right? That's the whole purpose of them.
They're not a statutory body. They're not a regulatory body. They're an advisory body. So any review of consents per se would be the responsibility of ECAN, not the zone committees.
So, Yanni,
Can I
you
suggest
take
that we
note
write
of
to-
that and give a response
Yeah.
to ECAN?
Can I suggest that we write to ECAN, noting that the 2020 target of the review of environmental flows and catchment load limits, it's just on page 4 of the Canterbury Water Management Strategy targets and goals, and we ask what work has been undertaken
What's in the resolution?
towards those 2020 targets of environmental flows and catchment load limits.
Okay,
It's
so
just the
we'll
first
make
two
it number 5.
on page 4.
Could you just say the wording out again for the...
That we write to ECAN, asking to understand what progress has been made on the 2020 targets of reviewing environmental flows and catchment load limits, and establishing and implementing a program to...
Hang on. What progress has been made?
Catchment and load limits. Yeah. Yep. So it's, what progress has been made in the 2020 targets of reviewing catchment and load limits? Oh, sorry, it's environmental flows. Review of environmental flows and catchment load limits. You just need to take the "and" out after catchment. Yeah, and then maybe a I don't know, like a kind of additional thing is, and what progress around establishing and implementing a program to review existing consents.
Existing consents.
And you could, I can quote the actual thing: in order to achieve catchment load limits. In order to achieve catchment load limits.
So I'm just wondering, would we ask council to write? Would that come from this committee, since this is the last
Come
meeting?
from the committee, yeah.
It's finished after today.
We could ask the zone committees to find out. We could ask the
That's right.
I don't know whoever, but I just think it's an important thing
Thanks,
that we
Yanni,
get
that's really
answered. Thank you.
Okay, Tim.
Yeah, thank you, Diane and Liz. I'm just a bit confused with regards to, following from Sayani, with regards to nitrates. So, Tamata Arawa and Three Waters are happy with the limits that are set, because there's nothing in the Three Waters proposal that mentions nitrates at all, is there?
My understanding is it's
Well-
a ministry of, it's a public health matter, so that would rest, in terms of setting the drinking water standard, I believe that still rests with the Ministry of Health. I could have that wrong. Yeah, but and that wouldn't be in the legislation.
Might get Helen.
Yeah.
Thank you, Helen.
It is complex stuff.
Yeah, no, look, well,
So the
yes,
ministry-
it is, it's not.
So the Ministry of Health retain the policy role around public health, and they will be the agency that will look at the issue of nitrates in drinking water and whether or not there's any change in the limit. If they recommend a change, then that will come through to Te Mata Arawai, be reflected in the standards and the requirements of drinking water suppliers. So that policy role stays with the Ministry of Health. So it's exactly the same for fluoride. For example, the Ministry of Health is looking at the issue of fluoride and public health. If they require someone to add fluoride, then Te Mata Arawai would be the agency that oversee that the level of fluoride is right.
So technically with nitrates, it's not at any point writing to ECAN because it should be the Ministry of Health that we're writing to, because they set.
So Environment Canterbury still retain responsibility for water as a resource, and so they have responsibilities around looking after the source water for drinking water supplies, as we do. So we continue to work closely with Environment Canterbury, and as you know, make submissions on plans relating to the protection of source waters.
But they're operating under the current maximum allowable value set by the Ministry of Health.
Yeah,
Well, we've got targets as well.
Yes, although Environment Canterbury, of course, did hear evidence around the changing understanding of nitrate and human health.
They can't change the requirements of levels, so it's got to come from the Ministry of Health to change those levels.
Well, yes and no. So, no, they can't change the drinking water standard, but they can look at the emerging science and take a risk-based approach to protecting source waters for human drinking water.
So when we were looking at, or when the government was looking at the three waters, and they, the Scottish model, the Tasmanian model, you've mentioned the Danish research and the Danish model. There's a whole lot of information, but it doesn't seem like anyone's there's nowhere it seems that the nitrates, there's a ruling on, or there's going to be a change with regards to concerns, because it is from the source that the nitrates are coming.
Yes, but that's not about Three Waters services and delivery of those services to you and I. That's about the policy behind that.
But we are, at the end of the day, we are talking about nitrates in drinking water, aren't we?
We are.
So my question is, I don't want staff to waste their time going to the wrong group. I mean, what is the concern? What is the cause? And who do we write to? Would be my thinking. Because it seems to be all over the place, to be quite honest. Not our side of things. Just stating.
So
government seems to be policies and
So we've actively submitted on the Land and Water Regional Plan and the sub-regional chapters of that to protect our own drinking water sources.
And didn't we wrote a joint letter with ECAN to the Minister? So the answer's been no, they don't want to adjust. This is different, number 5's different.
Yeah.
Not about the nitrates. Yeah.
I don't want to enter into the debate, but it is the World Health Organization standard that is applied in New Zealand. So that is the level, the maximum allowable value that's adopted in New Zealand for.
Yes, and it's for acute
the
toxicity.
The issue is whether it's acute and versus chronic.
That's
and
correct.
There is a study that supports a reduction in the maximum allowable value for that chronic exposure, and so that is an issue that I recall that is still being investigated in terms of review. We want New Zealand to conduct a matching trial to see whether the results would be but we've all to see whether the results would be matched in a similar population.
Yes.
And that's the University of Otago work.
Yeah,
And I
but
don't know
they're
if that's
doing
completed
theirs
yet,
is much more preliminary than that.
Yeah.
They're not actually agreed yet to do the review.
Well, Diane's just answered that we've been told that they're not interested in doing funding a further study. Is that correct?
I don't know if I'd go so far to say they're not interested, but I would say it's not high on their list of priorities, and it is quite a time-consuming process to go through looking at evidence and studies and then making the determination about whether a drinking water standard, regardless of which one it is, should be changed. It's just the nature of public health. It's not a fast process.
Right, Sarah.
Thanks. Just following on from that, sorry, Helen. I don't know, maybe you, maybe Diane. So off the back of our remit to local government New Zealand and all the pressure that came on about 3 or 4 years ago on the nitrates, the government set up a working group to look at the issue. And my understanding is it only met twice before it was disbanded. Is that right? Do you know?
That's what I recall reading.
Yeah. I'm just wondering if we could, add some pressure that way. I mean, the reality is that while there may be some costs to those who currently use the land above our source water on the other side of the Waipumakariri to lower the nitrates and things, there'll be huge costs if we have to try and remove nitrates from our water supply.
So do we want to somehow through some channel request an update from that working group? What happened in the
Or maybe we just, get an update on the nitrates and what we can, and maybe some advice on ways that we can, as a council, progress.
we want to put some
Or push
wording
for
on
it.
like a 6, Sarah, so that we committee request staff to bring an update on the central government working group.
Or central government work on nitrates and advice on ways that which we could push the issue or something similar
Was
to
it
that.
LGNZ, did you say? Or?
Well, it was off the back of the LGNZ remit that government set up because we did that to LGNZ, and so LGNZ put pressure on the government and they set up a working group,
Which you met twice.
which I think only met a couple of times. Yeah.
Notes from the second meeting might be.
I have a feeling that there's some, behind the scenes lobbying going on, right? Because nitrates is a,
It'd be good to see what LGNZ have done.
but it's going to be huge. No, the LGNZ got the working group.
Yeah,
from
but if they
government,
didn't
right?
keep it, pressure on them.
Just Pauline?
In source water?
In groundwater.
In groundwater. Thank you. Is that right, Sarah?
Any advice on how we could further push the issue?
Options for further advocacy.
Yeah, options for further advocacy.
Great. Yanni?
Yeah, I mean, given that this is on the zone committees, if you turn to page 32, you see that the Canterbury Water Management Strategy Action Plan progress, there were priority actions that were discussed with the zone committee. And although they say groundwater, I mean, it's not clear around whether the nutrient or the nitrate level is actually being considered as a priority. So, I mean, I thought we might like to actually write to the zone committees and ask whether they see this as a priority as well.
Well, we know that they do. Now, that is the Christchurch West Melton Zone Committee, isn't it, you're looking at?
Yeah.
Bearing in mind, most of their work's focusing on, stormwater and contamination.
But they have
whereas
mentioned
the Spelling Water one would
they have had a focus on it. There's no question. It's come quite often.
Oh, okay. I just couldn't tell from the minutes over, over that.
I think we've got some good action points here. I don't think we need to progress it any further. All right, if there's no more questions, do I have a mover for the... Thank you, Mike. And a seconder would be Sarah. Is there any discussion? Tim?
Thank you very much for the work done, and Liz, and the zone committees do an amazing amount of work, and they have. I was on one for a while, and it's really impressive. The farming industry as well as the urban environment is really, really good to see the uplift. But I'm still confused about who's going to make a decision and who's going to drive nitrates in the water, because if we're talking about, look, we've gone through one of the biggest changes in New Zealand with regards to three waters, and nowhere in that document is it really mentioned nitrates. And then just around this discussion, this ministry versus that ministry, behind closed doors in Wellington, it must be like a version of Yes Minister. It must be bloody ridiculous. Oh, but we'll have a working group, which only met twice and then gets disbanded. I mean, how important is drinking water to the New Zealand government? It's just amazing. So I'm really confused, but I do thank our staff, Diane, your team and the zone committees for the huge work that they do. Thank goodness someone's doing it.
Anyone else like to speak? So I think, well said, Tim. I think it's really good you've picked that up, and it's just gone into the ether somewhere, so hopefully we'll get a response in the not too distant future. And if you could also convey back to the chairs, and I'm sorry they couldn't make it today, but I do appreciate the effort it takes for them to come in. You know, they're pretty much volunteers in these roles. They put huge hours in, and all the committee members do, and I really appreciate the work that they do. This whole committee would like to convey thanks to them, and also to the fact that they've actually, you know, it's a work in progress, bringing the communities and doing all that work to actually activate communities and reach out and connect everyone. It's vital to our comprehensive discharge consent too. So it's helping us, it's helping the city, it's helping everyone. So on that note, I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Opposed, that's carried. So we'll move on to item, what are we up to, number 13, the biodiversity funding grant applications. Mover and a seconder. Any discussion? Aye. No discussion? You're off the hook. I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Opposed, that's carried.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, actually, that brings us remarkably to the end of the final meeting, and I'd just like to say a few words as well before I give the closing kata kia, and just to say that it's been an amazing committee actually to be sitting in this chair with. I freaked out when Leanne asked me to chair this because I thought, oh, it's so huge. It's actually, you know, 30% of what we do comes through here, and we've had some big items. Most have been challenging, but some, like the land drainage and water improvement projects and biodiversity funding, have been really exciting and rewarding. And so that's really, really, really good side of it. In the resource recovery, we've worked through the waste minimisation strategy and run the I've Been Good curbside recycling education program with good success in reducing the yellow bin contamination, which was a huge issue for a while there. And Eco Central has, of course, begun its big $16 million MRF upgrade. And in our drinking water, we've continued to invest heavily in our long-standing infrastructure improvement program, working steadily towards reaching the new, increasingly shiny gold-plated standards now required to remove chlorine on a zone-by-zone basis. And we're continuing this work despite an uncertain future for council under the Government 3 water reforms. The consultation through the Select Committee process will be an interesting time, to say the least, as I know there'll be many New Zealanders unhappy with the mega entity model. But enough said about that, I could talk for hours. But we're continuing with our program because it's the right thing to do. And in our stormwater area, we've achieved a comprehensive stormwater discharge consent. I'm repeating a little bit of what Helen so succinctly put in her presentation, but it's worth pointing out that we have received that consent from Environment Canterbury, and during which process we worked alongside Ngāi Tahu really closely. And the resulting consent now relies heavily on community participation and partnerships, such as the Community Waterways Partnership, and working with the zone committees to remove the contaminants at source. So once again, there's a huge emphasis on education and collaboration. And we also recognise now the taonga of wetlands, that they are all the lungs of our environment. And sadly, historically, many were drained and filled in to provide for urban development. So we're now reversing that resulting degradation of our water bodies by recreating wetlands across Otatahi, and with Horseshoe Lake being the most recent under design, and also in close collaboration with Ngāi Tahu. I probably should use the word partnership there, really. This committee initiated the Zone Committee's reporting, and I felt that was really important to give us oversight of their projects and to share information and enhance working together. I'm really proud of our biodiversity partnership funding, which we increased from a maximum of 40k per application to 60,000 per application, and we increased the annual fund to 400,000 from 200. So that means over the past 3 years we've contributed 800,000, which was matched by private landowners, equalling 1.6 million which has helped protect our Indigenous species and ecosystems, which is a tangible commitment from this council to improve our environment for future generations. So I've highlighted just some of the work. There's no time to actually go into all of it, but I just want to thank our staff, Jane here, the Secretariat, Helen who's just left the room, and everybody else who's actually participated in this amazing work. Sorry, Phil? Oh, she's there, you're hiding. Helen. Thank you, Helen. And all your team. And no one does this on their own. I know we've got some amazing talent in this building, and this program here uses the expertise there. So amazing mahi in challenging times. So thank you once again, and thank you for this committee for putting up with me in the chair. It's been really great. I'll close with the karakia.
Just before that, just want to, on behalf of my fellow councillors, the Mayor, thank you for all the work you've done, and again to your advisors. So thank you, Pauline. Cheers.
Kia ora. Tukuna tiwara ki rere ki te taumata. Ko te matatika matapono, hiarehi ina mahi. Ka aratahi te tira kia iki panuku, kia iki tangaroa. Homie huye, tai kie. Kia ora. So we will...